ese me ordeno.
No sé si ella tiene cabello, no sé si es por algo, es fantástica, pero hay una mejor.
No, porque este lo trabaja al gusto por al gusto. ¿Cuál es? Por favor.
Bueno, no tienen. Mi abuela hacía chocolate en casa, entonces he pescado.
Bueno, esto lo tenemos pendiente. Hello, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. You're all here today because you already know what a treat it is to meet with the esteemed author, Carmen Boullosa, who has over a dozen novels, poems, and plays to her name. A writer whose works are both aesthetic wonders as well as philosophical meditations on some of the most important questions of our times. Among her novels are those translated into English, including Texas and Leaving Tabasco, and hopefully this is just my personal wish, before too long, La Otra Mano de Lepanto, a novel that I just love. That's just my personal hope. But today we are here gathered to celebrate the publication of the Book of Eve, the English translation of El Libro de Eva, a book that I also adore and plan to give to many friends, the edition in Spanish and the edition in English. That we could have a conversation just about the visuals on these copies. So in 1945, stepping away from our author, in 1945, a collection of texts that have come to be known in common parlance as the Gnostic Gospels, the Book of Mary, the Book of Thomas, the Book of Philip, changed our knowledge of early Christianity. We remember that not all sacred books were included in the New Testament, and that indeed the selection of books was a fundamentally political act. Professor Elaine Pagels, who spoke here at the Stanford Humanities Center a few years ago, wrote the landmark study about how these early Christian texts and their exclusion from the Bible shaped not just early faith, but Christian and indeed Western culture. Now, Carmen Boullosa expands on this textual and historical phenomenon in the world of fiction, in the realm of fiction, better said, with the Book of Eve. The Book of Eve is a novel that reads as a collection of manuscripts constituting a sacred book, much like a book that would be found, as the Gnostic Gospels were, in a field in Egypt. But this time it's not a book from early Christianity, but much, much earlier, the founding book of humanity. It is a book recounting Genesis from the perspective of Eve, a perspective that has been culled or suppressed entirely from Judeo-Christian canon and culture, causing great harm to all of humanity. The Book of Eve is a meditation on history and storytelling as venues for the creation of culture, customs, norms, and knowledge. Equally, a denunciation of the violence of the patriarchy and an aesthetically sophisticated novel about the moral import of reading. The Book of Eve creates a world in which Eve is agentic, clever, kind, sensuous, ingenious, and articulate. Even as Adam is a brute. I just want to throw my binder here. He's a brute, and Eve is idealized. The novel avoids falling into a neat gender binary, so it's not that simplistic. And I'd highlight that Boullosa evokes this world where there are multiple masculinities. And Cain, for example, the child of Adam and Eve, Cain complicates this male-female binary with a model of masculinity at odds with the Adamic alpha male. In the Book of Eve, fiction wins in some surprising ways, but fiction also loses. And I want to invite you to think about that while we listen to the reading, because we have a book of fiction that presents itself as a chronicle and a history. So in some ways, the chronicle and the history win, even as it's fiction, because inside of the story, we have, again, Eve writes a chronicle and a history, but it's no match for inventive, creative Adam. Adam, who writes from a position of fear and inferiority, he authors fiction. And fiction wins over chronicle but it's this fiction that has suppressed the voice of Eve. So fiction wins and loses in this novel in interesting ways. So Adam's fiction, his narrative, eclipsed the words and in fact the very voice of Eve herself. So with this attention to the slippery nature of fiction and truth, of words and silence, of power and novel, let us turn to the person you came to see, Carmen Boullosa and the Book of Eve. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. It's been for me, every time I've spoken about the book with somebody, in this case Elizabeth, I have discovered something I didn't imagine it was going to come out. This fiction that in fact is destroyed or destroys reality. Mm-hmm. And this book that in that case, though it is a work of fiction, in reality is a piece of realism that wants to destroy a fiction, Adam's. So I love that, and it's I'm very grateful for your reading. I feel wonderful. I feel the book must be alive. Mm-hmm. If it has provoked wonderful readers, as you, I don't want to name the ones that I have had the dialogue, but each one has turned it into something very different to my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I then had to turn around and look at the novel because I wrote it and I fled. Not that I wanted to, but it's the destiny of a writer. Mm-hmm. You finish the book, you live with the book, the book is your life, you are totally devoted to it, it's all you think about, it's the center of your life, you don't want it to end, you want to continue correcting it, but suddenly it's done. You know you should not hold it. So you publish it and the book becomes a traitor, it's gone. And then you are, or in my case, I feel like orphan, and I normally try to treasure a project before the book abandons me, because if not, I really feel lost. I don't have a center. I'm just like, whoa. And life is naturally chaotic, disorganized, and writing a novel makes you belong to a world that is naturally, though might be it's natural to be chaotic, it's naturally ordered. And you enter a world that has sense, sometimes very difficult sense, like when years ago in the early 90s, I wrote a series of novels of pirates that were incredibly violent, evidently misogynist. The characters, women are not permitted in the Brothers of the Coast society, and it was not for. I always thought, what am I doing here? I knew very well in my mind, but not in my skin. In my skin, I was. But even those, I mean, when they were gone, they were gone. It was so miserable. So these kind of events give them back to me if I have the luck to have an intelligent reader giving it life again. So thank you. Thank you. Also, I have to say my thanks because to the. Yes, I know that Lisa Zubillo presented me. I have to say thanks to the Department of Iberian and Latin American Studies, ILAC, to the Humanities Centers of Latin American Studies at Stanford class, to the seminar for receiving me here in your graduate seminar of this fall, the Latin American graduate seminar, and to Elizabeth Sainz-Ackerman, to Sarah, to Lisa Zubillo. Thank you so much because you made my stay here present, and to Hector Hoyos, to whom I wrote I was going to come to lead Quake. And he is a culprit, the ultimate culprit. So thank you all for your work, Sarah. Thank you, don't hide. Thank you all. So that's my thank you to you, especially for this presentation, and to those who made this stay possible. And you tell me if I start or if you start with.
So you were going to read a favorite passage?
I could, but I don't know if we have time.
I think we have time.
Okay. I had thought of Adam said, but maybe you don't like that idea. Maybe you prefer something else. But
no, please.
As you
I think it's germane.
Is 51. The translation by Samantha Schnee. She opted for writing titles to every part. Some are very short portions, like this one I'm going to read now. Some other ones are pretty long. They used to be like table of contents, but she moved them to the pieces, which I thought was a terrific idea. And as in reality is her book, because it's in English and she wrote it, and I know what is to write. Well, I have to give her credit, Samantha Schnee. Enough nonsense. Adam said that a he, whose name could not be spoken, created everything. He made it all out of clay and infused it with the breath of life so that he could enjoy creation. Because Adam was alone, he decided to make Eve from a rib. I was nothing more than a part of an angry man. And furthermore, Adam said he was not just the first and the origin of my person, but also when I ate the fruit, which was forbidden by Yahweh, I sinned, which caused our expulsion from Eden, which was paradise, a fantastic lie. Because of me, we had to work as a punishment, outrageous, and experience the pain of childbirth. You already know the truth. This is half the book. In his Cain way of speaking, every time Cain heard these Adamic ravings, he said, "But Adam, knowledge is a good thing. Life is good. How can you say that what Eve has given us is bad?"
That's great. Thank you. So, would you entertain some questions?
Of course.
All right.
I can give me one first if you want,
Please.
but I would entertain all questions.
You may ask yourself first.
I do ask me, today in the morning I asked me, sincerely, why on earth did I write this book? I have published 19 novels. A good number of them do refurbish history or want to tell the story differently. In the case of Texas, it's very evident. The official lie, true, of how Texas became part of the USA is wrong. So I did a historical, I had a historical argument, but then writing is another thing. I had to give it a life of its own. So I made the 7 invasions of the USA of a Mexican character, Juan Nepomuceno Cortina, who is a historical character and who did invade the USA 7 times, and who stopped doing so or even left the last time, pushed by the Mexican government, and was betrayed by Porfirio Diaz because he told him, come, we'll honor you, And in reality, come, he imprisoned him in a house in Mexico City, far away from his beloved Texas. His mother owned where Brownsville was built and other land around, a big piece of territory. And they were cheated, and he was fighting for their rights. They had been promised they were going to be American citizens. They were promised they were going to keep their properties, and they made fools of them. So he does several acts. He's a wonderful character. And what I did is I pressed all his invasions in only one. In fact, I divide the book in two. First, one incident, what makes him flee for the last time Brownsville, because in an attack of rage he shoots the sheriff, who happens to be an idiot in the book and in reality. And he shoots and has to flee, not to be taken to prison. And I used that incident, the very few minutes of the incident and the fleeing, to introduce all the characters of the town and surroundings. So there are 278 characters acting at the same time, passing the gossip of what Juan Nepomuceno Cortina has done, zoom, 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 and the reaction of all of them. And in the second part, I have all the invasions in one. So it was first my need to make a historical correction, then my need to give Juan Nepomuceno Cortina a reality in fiction, and then how to write it. And I really did the labor, let's say a clock labor. How do you put all those facts in very few minutes? So it was that artisan work, and then the tone and the writing. I had an enormous amount of fun writing that book. I enjoyed all the first reading about it, then exploring the territory, learning a lot, and then have my say, or Nepomuceno's say. But in this case, I was not refurbishing history.
Oh.
Well, because Eve is not a historical figure. Also, Nepomuceno wrote many letters, just to compare it with him, because I wrote a novel of Sophonisba Anguissola, a painter in the court in Spain at the times of Cervantes. When I wrote it, nobody talked about her. I saw her in an exhibition at the Met on the world of Caravaggio, and there was a little miniature of hers, and I fell in love with that little auto-portrait, and it had something that, and so I started reading and finding things about her. I needed to recover her, and I wanted her paintings to be in action. El Prado has in its collection only one Sophonisba, one of her paintings. So when the book was published by Ciruela in Spain, I had a friend who introduced me to the main curator then in El Prado, and I went and I saw him and told him, why don't we do the book event here in front of the Sophonisba you have? And he said, oh no, she's a minor artist. And some months ago that I went to Madrid, maybe a year ago, there was an exhibition on Sophonisba at El Prado. She was no longer a minor artist. So time changes. But in that minute, I knew she was not a minor artist. There's one painting of hers that's attributed to Greco, but in reality it's hers, but the Pollock collection that owns it doesn't want to let it go because then it's worthless money, etc. So I had like this, but in the case of it was nothing personal. I had the personal with Texas, yes, but with Juan Nepomuceno Cortina, whom I had encountered while thinking about Texas. And in the case of Sophonisba Anguissola, it was also personal. And Eve, in the Genesis, she speaks once. She acts once and ruins us all. And then, in reality, what I was attached to or I'm attached to, are those grand Mexican goddesses of pre-Hispanic times. And I remember that when I started really thinking honestly about Eve was in front of the Tlatecutli, that is, as you've seen maybe in Museo Mayor of Mexico City, well, bigger than this room. No, maybe it's the size of this room. Maybe different proportion, but the same feet, or maybe big. No, I think it's the same feet. And she's there, the monolith, and she's fierce. She's devouring the Tlatoani, the king of the Nahua Empire, and at the same time she's giving birth. She's a sensual woman and she's a repugnant, fierce animal. So she has all this complexity, and I looked at her again with fascination, because it's not only her, Goyoshaltli, all those goddesses I adore, literally. And I was looking at her and I said, how do we have Eve? I mean, I, as a Catholic raised girl, instead of having this, I had Eve. Why? This cannot be. So I looked first in the web for former versions, then obviously I found the book you mentioned, and then I found the book of graves on ancient Jewish myths, and I started like reading. It was only an intellectual curiosity. And after all that, I said, what do I do with this? And I said, well, nothing. Sometimes I only have the intellectual curiosity, because I didn't have her. I didn't have her. I thought of the idea of the manuscript, and I imagined pieces of the manuscript. I passed it in the hands of women authors I adore, looking into their works when they talk about Cain, Abel, Eve, and I saw their reactions, but that didn't work as a book either. It's very repetitive, little contrasts. And then I was ready to let her go when she started speaking. She talked to me, and I heard her voice. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I cannot, it's preposterous. How can I write a book about Eve? And then she gave it all away. So it was all this hard working, and then it was there. And it was also beautiful writing it.
It turned out beautifully. I wanted to ask, did you intend for it to be funny?
Yes.
Because there's some really funny parts in here. The clitoris envy, the apple seed. There's so many instances where I literally laughed out loud. And so I wanted to know
when she makes the orifice to evacuate.
Yes.
Because they come out of Eden. Eden is boring is a very mild word. Eden, it's a space without time. It's a space without conscience. It's a space without bodies. It's a space without sensuality. It's a space without pain. It's a space without pleasure. It's void. And I imagined also void of color. And I imagined void of wind. And I imagined it void of what is earth. So in the minute they come out, Eve adores earth. Is fantastic. This is life. And the earth. And she's not an Edenite. She was there by mistake. But when they come out, they have no, in my non-school we would say, private parts. They had no sex. They were like Barbie and Ken. And in the clitoris part, we see her making it herself. And then out of envy, Adam does his best. But it doesn't work the same.
It's hilarious. And the anus, too.
Exactly, the anus, too.
As an afterthought.
Yes. So fun, but it was not me. It was a bit also Eve laughing at me saying, well, I had read all these serious things, and I had given word to our important women writers to talk about you. And there she was, like, laughing and having fun and enjoying life. That's what she likes.
That's great.
As me.
So do you see this? Do you see a lot of your voice in this? Does this novel feel like it has more of your voice and more of your perspective than others?
Very good question, and I honestly don't know how to answer it, because my earlier novels, the novels I recreated children, they had a lot in common with my own childhood. The first one was about my horrible stepmother, horrible. I mean, it's nothing personal, it's scientific. Then the second one had to do with my school and the childhood. It's what now they call autofiction in parts. Not very loyal to the author, but very loyal to fiction. And then I started touching a territory that was not mine, but that I desired more than my own. And I wrote a novel on Moctezuma called Llanto. Moctezuma reappears. His ashes come out of an ant hole, an ant house, however you say that, hormiguero, and they again turn into a body. The magical place that was for the Nahuas, the ant's house, the connection between the infra world, the world of the dead, and ours. So he's like a puff of the world, of the earth, and comes out. So it was a lot of historical, but fiction also working there, comes out and comes around with three women of my generation, what happens between them. So I started like touching other territories. Cielos de la Tierra, I went to the Colegio de Santa Cruz Tlatelolco in the 17th century, things that are, and there I did a part of science fiction. And it's like I don't consider them. Yes, they are my novels. Yes, they are my devils. Yes, it is my pen, because I handwrite everything still.
Handwrite?
Everything I can write. Everything I can write. My rotten hand proves it. Everything I can write. I handwrite everything I correct. I type. But mine, yes, they are very much mine, but me, I think they are all a way of fleeing, of being with you, with the world of the writer, which is the literature, is language. Language is never ours. Yes, we say mi lengua materna, and we say I speak, but we do it with a communal tool. It's done by all. So it's a way of being us, I think. So I don't know if it's more me. I don't know, but I like the question a lot. And if I ever return to a shrink, I'm going to explore it. For the moment, I'm writing other novel and I'm exploring other world.
Can we ask what that novel will be?
I don't know if it will be.
Fair enough.
But I've been working already for more than 3 years on, it's all by chance also, because all are like by chance. But I keep like saying, I wanted once upon a time to write when I first read Page, I wanted to write a novel on Virgin Mary. And I tried, but it didn't work. We didn't have the mutual likenesses. She didn't like me and I had my problems, and that didn't happen. The match didn't work. But in this case, I didn't think, also like Eve, I didn't think I was going to write about it. My father came from a very old family of Mexico, very pretentious. There are several, they kept an album of their important people in their family, 2 sides of his family, and there are books written about some of them. And I found my paternal grandmother gave me some things while she was still alive, because I was a writer, and she was very proud I was a writer. And she gave me a manuscript, and I didn't know that. of her grandmother. And I opened it. And it's all handwritten like me, with a ink color that is not black, a little bit purple, and poems in which I see many other authors reflected in her time, 1825. And she was married to a guy that gives name to an important avenue in Mexico, Calle Doctor Vertis, and he was the husband. My grandmother was Cortina Vertis. And then I found an aunt of her, which is an artist I admire, Angela Gaza. And then there's another artist, Maria Jose Cortina. And then I started finding them here and there. One of the guys who signed the Mexican Independence Act is my grandfather in 6th grade. The guy who brought the cacao from Peru, from Guayaquil, and the ones who ran the Manila Galleon were also in that family. So I boarded the Manila Galleon. Thanks to that, the poems, not very good poems, of my bisabuela, my grandmother, whom I have in high respect. And then I boarded the Manila Galleon. And I've been there and discovering many things of Mexico aboard the Manila Galleon. The Chinese slaves that were Chinese but Indian. I did a genetical test. I had part blood of Indian from North India, Gujarati. So I've been all these things, and I've been writing portions of all these characters while I'm doing maps, because I always do maps. And in this occasion, some might think I'm not writing a novel but doing maps, because I've done so many plans, visual plans, so many. I could have an exhibition by now. And then I embroider my plans, I paint them, I do little things with images here and there, and more plans, and yet not a book. But it'll happen, because I've been pushing, or not. It might be, it has happened to me. It has even happened to me that I finish a book and I know it doesn't work and I don't publish it. So, but I'm working on that, and I'm having also a lot of fun. I love to write, and I love to read. And I love to read. I've learned how to read things that are not only literary, not only literature, but also now I'm into the archives, or El Archivo General de la Nación, and reading the notary things and all that. I have fun with all. And I learn, and I think, mainly I've been thinking, how can it be that Mexico doesn't say we were the axis of the world? Do you think New York is the capital of the world, or was the capital of the world after the Second World War? That's what the New Yorkers think. They are not. They never were, but they think so. In the case of Mexico City, we were the axis of the world, because we connected. It's not true that Manila was controlled by Spain. Manila was founded and kept and organized, and the laws were all done in Mexico City. And Mexico City, Acapulco, Mexico City, Veracruz, Mexico City, Acapulco, Manila, Mexico City, Veracruz, Cadiz. We maintained the crown. We did it. So we did it, and then we don't have like that sense of ourselves. And then 2 days ago or 3 days ago in a dinner, the guy sitting aside me, always I have those guys that sit aside me. The guy sitting aside me tells me, I understand what the violence in Mexico is there, and the cartels and all that. And I asked him, why? And he said, because Mexico has that peculiar relationship with death. I felt like the Mexicans he was describing. I wanted to say, are you kidding? No, dear, no, it's not the reason. Who consumes the drugs? The USA. Who forbids the drugs? USA. Who has entered this story? Well, many other reasons, I said. Yes, many other reasons, but don't tell me it's because we Mexicans, yes, you've done it since ancient times. You only like death. I said, no, we also like silver. We like cochinilla. We like copper. We like cacao. and we love to export the ceramics, and we created what Baroque art, and we are not consumers of that. We are not dead. We were the axis of the world, and in many ways we continue being that. We are all connected. We were the first instance of globalization, and we are part of this globalization. And we are, don't tell me that. So I always learn, I get my passions there, I explore and write.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's my life.
I can't wait to read this book about the Manila Galleon. Some people here have taken a course with me where we explore the Manila Galleon and all of these things you're talking about. It is just absolutely fascinating.
The Boxer Codex blows my head. Yes, and many other things there.
Would anyone like to ask a question? One in the back?
Carmen, bienvenida a Stanford.
Gracias.
Tengo un par de preguntas. I have a couple of questions. Something you didn't mention about your working process as a writer was what language you use to write your drafts. So I'd be interested in knowing if you do the Spanish first, then translate, etc. But then my other question would be, what would have been for you if you had stayed in Mexico? Because many times, I'm from Mexico City as well. Many times for us, it takes living elsewhere outside of Mexico to discover your own country, for that matter, not necessarily Mexico.
Thank you for your questions. I only write in Spanish. I think in Spanish. I dream in Spanish. I love in Spanish, even a gringo, which is the case. And I started living in New York when I was already 50 years old. I was shaped by Mexico. All my being is that. New York has given me a lot of things, not only a beautiful husband, but also the library, the use of it so splendid and opulent, I would use that word. The distance is always good for a writer. I've never really left Mexico in the sense that I go whenever I can. I stay there long periods, and I have my children there, my grandchildren there, my family, with few exceptions. Here's a cousin that lives away abroad too, Ale and Sarah, her daughter. But I'm 100%. I'm from there. I can't explain to what degree. Of course, also the city where I was born, well, is not the city that exists now. I was born in Mexico City. In the records it said we were 3 million Chilangos, Mexican citizens living there. The fact is not precise, but few compared to the 22 that are now living in the urban area, 22 million. And it has changed all of it, but it's the same place and the same inertias and the same many things. I recognized it like familiar. In New York, I'm always a foreigner, like lots of New Yorkers. That's for me also very welcoming. It's a city that has too many foreigners and now even more. So I do think that one writes as a writer. Evidently, I write in Spanish, as I say. I read the newspaper. I am always like trying to find out what's going on in Mexico. I'm obsessed by Mexico. But distance makes a thing. It does. Like what you eat, like how you do your daily life, with whom you talk. So yes, I think that evidently some things have changed. La Otra Mano de Lepanto, also my favorite of
Really?
all my novels by far. I wrote it in New York. Maybe I could not have written it if I hadn't been in New York when the Twin Towers were attacked, as they are called, fell. And then Bush declared the war against the Arabs, and then I got obsessed by the Turks and the Christians fighting each other, the Catholics and Turks. And then I got there, and then once in New York I went to a wonderful lecture of Ana Maria Dopico, Dr. Dopico, on the expulsion of the Moors, and I got obsessed by it and the paintings, and I was looking for them, and because I publish my books in Spain too, I go there, I go to the museums, I started like getting the thing, and maybe I wouldn't have written that book because it was pretty traumatic to be in New York City. I had just arrived for the grant at the New York Public Library when the twins fell. And I literally saw the paper flying, coming after the explosion, the las hojas de papel, the sheets flying across the river in our heads, my daughter with her eyebrows full of dust of the towers, not knowing what was happening. All that was something very intense, and it turned into a novel where the Twin Towers are not mentioned, has nothing to do, but deep into it, there's something. That explosion, I mean, the fight of the Arabs and the power of the money and the retelling the story differently. I stole a character from Cervantes, retold the story clearly as I thought it had been. And I wouldn't have written it in Mexico. I don't know what would I have written in Mexico. Maybe something different. My feeling is that I always live in a frontier. That's my feeling. Now, when I was living in Mexico, did I live in a frontier? Most possibly. Because of my generation, I was a woman. I didn't notice it. Emily Hind was that invited me to the University of Florida, showed photos of the first prizes and things I was at, and it was men, and me. And I was recognized by women, most of them outside Mexico. When important essays appeared about my work, it was Jim Franco, it was Norma Clan, it was Edna Pfeiffer from Germany, Marta Canfield from Italy. One thing were the reviews, but really taking me seriously was I was in a frontier. So I live in a frontier. I'm a fronteriza.
So I think we had a question here. Did you have a question? No? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. How is your book received differently in Mexico or Latin America versus in the US? And also, what kind of Latin American issues with gender specifically do you think were reflected in the Words of Eve?
The first question, the book appeared during COVID times, during the pandemic, so I couldn't touch really the reaction. It was a terrible moment. It was too early to be Zoom landing, and it was like in a very bad moment. So I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't compare. I can't put them aside because they were like in other century, very strange. Now, I do think that the book is deeply Mexican, deeply Catholic Mexican, from that deep world of my very mochos parents. I don't know how you say mocho, but mocho is that really, really, really like deeply Catholics, a very strange way of being Catholics because they were radicals, and Catholics are never really radicals, except they were when they were fighting for a continent for the planet. But normally they have like a more permissive thing, and my parents, especially in my childhood, we were a missionary family. We went to live to a town to preach the word of God. That between Catholics is very, very unusual. My mother was very unusual. She would have been a radical, whatever passion she acquired. She died very young, but even in her life she was radical. Dying that young, with my smallest sister was 2 years old. She was going to be 38, so she was young. And they were a peculiar, and all that I think is very much in the book. The book has something very Catholic and also very radical, I think.
Hi everyone, thank you Carmen for such a wonderful talk. I have a question about the process of writing, and in particular in relation to el género literario, specifically because this is a novel, and I just want to see if it's meaningful or useful for you to make a distinction when writing inside a play, a novel, or a poetry book, because I had a sense, like for instance in this book specifically, creation is an incomplete process. And for instance, when I think about a play and the afterlife of a play, sometimes it slightly changes. If the play has been staged, you want to do like some changes in terms of like, oh, I want these characters to say it more intensely, for instance. But maybe that's not the case with a novel.
Let me try to answer your very smart question. When I write, I don't believe in genres. So when I start working on a project and when I'm preparing it, I do not know if it's going to be a poem, it's going to be an intent of an essay, it's going to be a novel. It's been long I don't write theater. The difference with theater, but not that long, the difference with theater is that all the theater I wrote has been for somebody, because I know it's going to be part of their acting. So when I wrote, because I did write a good number of plays, I wrote them specifically for Jesusa, the first one, Sombras Blancas. In fact, they invited me when they were already rehearsing a play that they didn't have the play. They didn't have the play, they had only achieved a state that they called vacío, emptiness. So they had that feeling, to say so, and they had a way of acting where they had stolen themselves from their conscience, to say so. They were pre-apes, to say so, or they acted like that. It was an exploration of a way of acting with Julio Castillo, who was the best director of stage in Mexico. And the Grupo Sombras Blancas with Jesusa, Francis Laboriel, Paloma Bullrich, Isabel Benet. They invite, Isabel called me, we have been in school together, if I would write for them a play, because they didn't have the play. So I went to the rehearsals and I saw that, and I said, oh yes, I write it. And they had an idea, they wanted to work with the radio play of Sylvia Plath, Three Women, but it didn't work, it was not for them. So what I did is I wrote the last hour of death, of life of Sylvia Plath, her ritual of death, when she prepares the bottle for the babies, all her ritual while she talks with her mother, and her poems are reproduced, some of the poems are reproduced on stage. The play was fabulous because Julio Castillo was wonderful, and because Jesusa is so talented, the actresses were so talented, the stage, all the process. So I work with them. Same in my second play, Trece Señoritas. I work with Jesus and Magali, Liliana. From the very beginning, we started dreaming. We wanted to do a play on an artist that was then despised in Mexico, Frida Kahlo. Nobody cared about Frida Kahlo but us. And we staged 13 paintings of Frida Kahlo, Trece Señoritas. And I wrote and directed, in that case, the play. Little words, lots of silences and words that then we took out. Then I did another one for two young actresses that came to see me, and they told me, "Oh, why don't you write the play for us?" And I said, I have no time. I had my own only 2 theater bar, I had a baby, I had no time. And when they left, I said, oh, they are perfect for a play. And I imagined the play, and I wrote them the play. And it's called Cocinar Hombres, Cooking Men. And so like that, I've done plays. And I've written, that's why I say I have done some recently too, because I've written some for people, and then we don't stage them for reasons they don't like what I did, or we don't get the money, or some of them, one gets a role in a movie, or things that happen. But I have this thing, I understand in theater, it's not the case of novels, not even this. You write them, they are their own entity, equally a poem, equally an essay, not a lecture. A lecture also has the interaction. I write it and then something happens there. So, and I rarely publish my lectures. Rarely, because there's something there.
I can't imagine a life where I didn't publish my lectures. That's what I do. I just want to interrupt for a moment to thank everyone who's joining us online right now. This ends our transmission. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody else don't go away. All right, thank you.